This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Breaking Ground, a new podcast about earth-moving machinery and characters in the industry. If you're in the earth-moving industry, a machine owner, a classic machinery lover, or anyone interested in this side of New Zealand life, then this is the show for you. Both your hosts work for Terra, New Zealand's Caterpillar machinery dealer. I'm Richard Clark.
And I'm Marty Hewitt. In this podcast, we'll hear stories from a wide range of characters in the industry. And today we're talking to Martin Hewitt. Originally from London, Martin has been in the industry for 50 years, starting as a survey technician, then moving into senior roles within GeoSystems and more recently Sitech. An expert in positioning systems, including those in Cat machines, he's been involved in many major New Zealand projects over the years, becoming a bit of an industry legend. It's great to have him here in the studio today. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, you arrived in New Zealand as a young survey technician back in 1974?
That's right, yes.
What drew you here and what were your sort of first impressions?
Well, the reason I came here was that I met my wife-to-be, Wendy, in London when she was doing her OE. And she originally obviously came from Christchurch. So we decided to, looked at it and said, right, we'll move back. Well, I thought there was more opportunities here and I also wanted to travel. I hadn't really been outside Europe much, so it was a good opportunity, I thought. And here we still are.
I was going to say, sound like it lasted very well.
Yeah, the accent's been lost a little bit as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, a few people still put the odd word.
Now, you will have seen some incredible changes in technology over the last 50 years. Can you take us right back to the beginning? What changes stand out the most?
Well, I think from my point of view, originally my background is in surveying, and the development of GPS was probably the biggest change that we saw, being able to position things accurately without having to use a measuring band or a optical instrument. That was very significant. Then obviously that technology developed and we started to see it being used in construction. Some of the very early systems were just literally for positioning a machine, but now, of course, we have automated machines. We have a whole range of different technologies built around that one breakthrough, if you like. And the other thing I think which has also come into that now is the connectivity between machines and people on the ground back to the office. With people being able to basically see what's happening in real time. So those are probably some of the most significant things I've seen. Yep.
So it sounds like you sort of, as you've come in and seen all these different things pop up, you've probably been one of the first people to see new technology and that sort of thing come through and being used for the first time. Can you tell us about some of those?
Yes, well, I think when I was with Elliott Sinclair and Partners as a young associate there, we got involved with Sakisha, who were a New Zealand company, and we were able to use the technology they were bringing out, mainly in sort of measurement products, but also combine that with some products which we bought in ourselves, either from local companies or from overseas. So I think the things which I remember were being able to use GPS for not just for surveying, but for systems outside of the classic surveying construction. So, on machines for people doing just mapping tasks, and agriculture. That was another huge one where we started seeing guidance for tractors and combine harvesters. Now it's pretty much standard in those types of machines. Going right back to when I was in the UK, one of the things I saw there and got a chance to actually use it was a an instrument called the Zeiss Alta 2, and it was really the first total station, and it was a massive machine. They used to truck it around in a transit van because it was so big, but it could actually record so much information, and it had stored up to 400 points, and this was a miracle in those days. And if you wanted to download it, you could download it, and we used to actually put it out on punch tape. So it was quite a different system. And I think reflectorless technology in all its things, so being able to measure something with just by pointing something at it, and that sort of led to things like scanning and that type of thing in all sorts of things. And we'll probably talk about that a bit later on about that.
Oh, really interesting to hear the, I suppose, advancements over that period of time. You've certainly been there, I suppose, across the whole gambit of technology as it's evolved. And I suppose Christchurch hasn't always been a bit of a hub for technology and innovation, but it is now. Is there anything that you could put that down to, and how you've seen this develop?
Well, from my point of view, with the people I've been dealing with, we first started seeing it when we got involved with a company called Datacom Software Research. And that was a company which developed out of the Datacom group. And they started developing the first PC-based programs for surveyors. Now, this was before you saw graphics and you had twin floppy disks. So it was a revolution in terms of surveying calculations and engineering calculations as well. And in turn, they started working with Sakisha, who we were representing, to develop some of the very early data loggers. So those data loggers became prime in terms of most surveyors and engineering surveyors as well. So this company developed under Alan Townsend, who was then the CEO, and we started working very closely. In fact, I can remember taking one of their initial staff out up the Port Hills to show them what a surveyor did, so that they could actually get a view for it. And basically then Trimble, do you want me to explain who Trimble are?
Yeah, I suppose some of our listeners probably don't know. They might have heard of Trimble, but possibly don't know what they do.
So Trimble was the leading company in the development of GPS positioning systems back in, I guess it was the mid-'80s. They first started putting them out there, and initially they weren't very portable. You basically drove them around the back of a truck, but they gradually started developing ones which were portable and able to be used by surveyors, and that's when we got involved in New Zealand. And so Trimble were developing this technology, and it expanded quite quickly. And they saw this little company in Christchurch, doing things that they couldn't do, and essentially they came and bought the company. That was in 1991. And at that stage, if you look back on the records, you can see Charlie Trimble as one of the directors, because he was the foundation. His background was actually in Hewlett-Packard. Okay. Hewlett-Packard didn't think there was any future in GPS. So he and another guy started a company in their garage.
Well, good to see that Hewlett-Packard were proved wrong.
And now it's a multi-billion-dollar international company. So yeah. So so it was interesting. So once they'd come and bought Trimble, they left it here because they believed its success was due to the innovation, the can-do attitude in New Zealand, and the people involved. And they left the Kiwis in charge of it, basically. And from then on, it's now developed. So now in Christchurch alone, they have over 300 people. And they acquired Loadrite in 2013 in Auckland and got another 100 people up there. So they're a relatively big employer now. And apart from Trimble, of course, there are a number of other high-tech companies in Christchurch, which I won't say have grown out of those, but I think, reflecting back, that was one of the starting points.
Yeah, great to see the innovation that's come into the areas, and Trimble being, I suppose, one of the first initiators of that.
Yeah, and of course, looking at machine control technology, a lot of that's been developed here as well. And even now, and you'll be aware, they have a big test site out the back of one of the quarries in Christchurch and have their own machines where they do all the testing, etc. So.
it's definitely an interesting mesh between sort of starting out with surveying and integrating with technologies and software, and you see this amalgamation of two, I suppose, originally very separate processes and thoughts, and now it's sort of meshed together into a sort of quite a clever beast, I suppose.
Yeah, the integration is fantastic.
Yeah. So you've worked on some of New Zealand's largest projects, and it's taken you to a lot of different things. Can you take us behind the scenes of some of those projects and how you're involved with them?
Sure. So there are a number which stand out. The first one's probably the Clyde Dam, which of course was a major development back in the 80s and 90s. It started in 1982, and the contract was developed between a company in Christchurch called W. Williamson and a German company, Zublin AG. We got involved just simply supplying surveying equipment in the late 80s as well, and then some of the very earliest GPS mapping systems and survey systems were used there as well. So really just to control the earthworks and also the building of the structure as well, the dam itself. And later on in the project, when they had the dam complete and before they started filling it, they had to widen the Clyde River. The tail coming out of the dam had to be deepened. So they were using excavators, large excavators on barges, and they needed to position those. So we used some of the very earliest electronic total stations which could track, so they could actually follow the prism. You didn't have to point them, and these were called telerometers, and they were made by a company in Sweden. And we supplied 3 of these to that project, which was Fletcher's along with a Dutch dredging company, Ham, JV again, and they bought 2 to use and 1 as a spare. And I don't think I'll tell any lies, but they were 140,000 New Zealand dollars each back in about 93. So you can imagine the cost of this. Good sale, but but they were used to control these barges and the excavators on them. And I think probably it was the first time we'd ever used, to survey technology to control construction machinery. And it was a really interesting project. And just as a side note, I can remember being out on a boat with one of the survey teams, and we looked through the tail race or the tail gate of the dam the day before they shut it and before they started filling it. So it was quite interesting. Yeah,
certainly a pretty impressive structure, and I think most people, if they're visiting, Central Otago, go and check the dam out, and pretty cool to be involved with that from I suppose the initial stages of it.
Yeah, another one which sticks out is Macrae's gold mine. So I mean, Macrae's, the gold mining there has been there since the late 1800s, but the modern day development started in 1990, and we again supplied some very early GPS equipment to the mine surveyors in 1994. And since then, when I say that's GeoSystems and Sitech, our involvement's been extensive, supplying various survey systems, software, machine control systems, and some of them were really interesting because some of those machines, as you're probably aware, are absolutely huge. And when you're trying to fit machine control to a 200-ton excavator, it's pretty challenging. So, and also, but even up till now, recently, back in October last year, we supplied a drilling machine using Trimble Groundworks, and which was utilised the mine's Wi-Fi network, and we're sending data backwards and forwards from that drill, and that was a Viola drill, which I think was supplied by Terra.
Yes, I've got the training package for that one, so it was quite entertaining.
And it features in our 2022 calendar as well.
Right. Okay. So next on the list I had was the Clearwater Golf Course, and anyone who's played golf around Christchurch probably has played the course. And I take no blame for it.
Yeah, I've certainly lost a few golf balls at that golf course before, so tell us a bit more about that.
Well, this is quite interesting because this is where we started working quite closely with Trimble in Christchurch, and we supplied and installed the very first real machine control system in New Zealand. And that was fitted to a Cat D4 dozer, which is a pretty small machine, and it was interesting to do. But that machine was then loaded with the 3D design of the golf course, and from the STR map software, which was developed by Datacom and then Trimble New Zealand, and it was a dual mast blade mounted system, and the very first in New Zealand and one of the very first in the world. So that was a real groundbreaker, and that was used to basically build the fairways and that type of thing. So yeah, but a small machine so they could get all the intricate little twists and turns that you need on a golf course.
So you worked on the big stuff and the small stuff?
Big stuff and small stuff, yeah. Perhaps another couple. I guess the one that really stands in your mind, because if you were in Christchurch the day of the earthquake, you'll never forget it. This was an extremely challenging time for all of us, with the central business district essentially destroyed, lots of roads closed, no-go areas and that type of thing. And Trimble loaned us what was called an MX2 scanning system, which was actually run onto a vehicle. And it was actually put onto my Nissan I had at the time. And it ran computers inside the vehicle, scanning system on top, GPS positioning as well. And that actually went in and mapped the whole of the red zone. So we were actually in the red zone literally within about a month after the earthquakes. So all they had done was cleared the roads, and that was about enough for us to get through. So it was a interesting, pretty scary time, because there was plenty of aftershocks, as people will remember. Just wondering if the next building was going to come down. And we did that, and we did the road from Christchurch out to Sumner, where they had all the cliffs that had come down and that sort of thing. Even made the TV news, so it was interesting. And we also had a static scanner, which sits on a tripod, and you can scan buildings and get 3D images. And we did things like the art centre, because that was pretty dangerous. You couldn't actually go in there. Another one we did was the basement car park in the art gallery, where they were actually using that as a civil defence centre. But we actually were asked to go down because you could see a whole lot of cracks in the foundations of that building as well. So we had to go and measure all those up. So that was interesting.
So essentially it was using the technology to be able to look into a structure, I suppose, without actually physically going in and seeing it and seeing the state of that structure. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And so they can then use those models to work out what needs to be done or what remedial action needs to be taken. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and the final one I'll mention is the Mackay's to Peka, or M2PP as it was known. And it was a great project to be involved with right from the start. We supplied all of the technology on that project, working with Fletcher's, and big shout out to their survey manager Will Newell, who was principal on that job. And Will had actually used to work for us. I'd brought Will out from the UK as an employee, and then he moved on to Fletcher's, and then so that was quite interesting. And also Goodman's, with their commitment to innovation, they've always been a very early adopter of the technology, and especially Stan Goodman, who had the vision for some of this stuff. So we were using machine control, all the machines were kitted out, all the surveyors were kitted out, and it's the first time we had what we call a connected site, where everything is essentially online. We could send data, we could interrogate machines, we could get data back from surveyors out in the field. And not only was it an efficiency and a cost saving, it was also safety. When you look at some of the excavations they were doing in peat, which was filling up with water the moment they pulled the bucket out, how could you send someone down there to survey that to work out the quantity? You just couldn't, but you could measure it from the bucket of the tip of the excavator bucket. So very, very interesting project. And we also delivered the GPS corrections via the cellular network as well. So.
Yeah, certainly a great project, and lots of Cat machines on that project as well.
Yes, there were.
It's good to see.
Yeah, there was. Yes, yeah.
So, Martin, that's some great projects that you've been involved with. What about some other memorable moments or experiences in your career? Can you tell us a bit more about those?
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty, but a few that stand out. One was, you listeners will probably recall the wreck of the Rena in the Bay of Plenty. And we were asked to devise a system to monitor the movement of that vessel while it was aground in real time. And we actually had to send our staff out on helicopters to actually install this equipment, and then we could monitor that from the shore. So it was a pretty different. I've never done anything like that ever since either. So
were you being dangled down from the helicopter to attach the equipment, or was it
no? They managed to land.
As hairy as that?
They did manage to land the helicopter on the back of the vessel, so we didn't actually have to go down by a rope. But it was good. It was very interesting. The other thing I've mentioned is the Christchurch earthquake. I mean, that will always stand out, I think, as being something not only to experience it, but also to be involved on the ground. I think that was a memorable thing. And the third one I'm going to mention is being involved in supplying machine control systems to Antarctica in conjunction with GOFs, which, of course, was the forerunner now to Terra. We worked very closely with them at that stage, and two of our guys went down to do the fit out and the training actually down in Antarctica. Fortunately, not me. I would have liked to, but that's the way it is.
So with all these sort of memorable and moments and that, and obviously things like Rena and hanging out of helicopters and that sort of thing, have you got a time that sort of stands out where you've really been out of your comfort zone, or you've had to sort of wing it because you weren't quite sure with what to do or that sort of thing? Yeah,
I thought hard about this. There's been a number of occasions, but one that stands out was very much in my early career when I was only 18. I was working for a survey company in London, and we were seconded to go on a job in Northern Ireland, and this is when the Troubles were still on. And we were to be surveying bombed out houses on the Falls Road. And it was only after we got there that we found out that the Army surveyors wouldn't do it because they were getting shot at. And so they thought they'd send the civilians in. We established on site, and within an hour we were warned off by the IRA in no uncertain manner. And that was the fastest exit you've ever seen. So that was probably a memorable moment which has never slipped my mind. Certainly something I was young and naive at the time, but looking back, how dangerous that was, unbelievable.
Yeah, not too many people could say that they were certainly in that situation with the IRA back in those days.
No, that's right.
Well, that's fantastic. I suppose just changing tact a little bit, your interest in technology started out as a bit of a part-time side gig.
Yes. Yeah.
But eventually, and it sounds like almost unexpectedly, led you to running GeoSystems, a successful company in itself. Tell us more about that.
So GeoSystems was started as an offshoot to a survey engineering practice, Elliott Sinclair and Partners, who are now still very much in the play and very big in the South Island. And I was an associate at that time, a registered surveyor, working for them. And they got involved in some of the very early technologies from Sakisha. And Sakisha were keen to find a distributor in the South Island. So they said, well, we could look after it. So we started GeoSystems, and I got seconded to manage it part-time. And, and we developed this relationship, and we developed the products. Sakisha, who are now called Sakira, a Japanese survey manufacturer, and at that stage they had their own offices in Auckland and Wellington, and they wanted to be. So that developed. We quite soon had 4 full-time staff. We moved out of the offices in the now demolished Manchester Unity building to an office in Durham Street. And then myself and my partner Dave Montgomery purchased GeoSystems from the Sinclair brothers in 1992. And as they say, the rest is history. And that's developed from GeoSystems and then splitting it into Sitech and Terra and Building Point, the 3 different companies, which now continue today under different ownership, but certainly the structure. And of course, half of that company is owned by Terra.
So from this experience, what did you sort of learn about yourself and about leadership or sort of developing a business?
Yeah, it was interesting. We were pretty naive at that time, but having never run a business, the first thing we did was go and get some good advice. That was key to it. And I think you've obviously got to be prepared to learn quickly. And and also do some education if you need to. I went on several business courses and sales courses and that sort of thing, because I'd never really done anything formal like that at all. The other thing I learned was trust your staff. You've employed them, and most of the guys we employed was technical to some extent, and of course there were also key administration staff. But you've employed them for the skills, so let them develop those and let them get on with it. I never believed in micromanaging people. I can't see how that works at all. The other thing I've always learned is always be honest. If you say you're going to do something, do it, or if you can't, at least make sure you let people know. And that applies to your staff, it applies to your suppliers, and it applies to your clients as well. I think that's really key. And I hope anyone who talks about me will talk about me as being an honest person. So that's key to me. And if you're in a small business, final point, you're a frontline person. You're not a backseat manager. You've got to be involved in the business. And again, we were very, very hands-on and involved. And of course, my passion for technology meant I wasn't going to let that go anyway. So,
no, it sounds brilliant. So, thank you very much, Martin, for coming on to Breaking Ground today. It's been fantastic chatting with you, and thank you to our listeners, and hopefully you've enjoyed today's chat.
Yeah, that's brought back a lot of memories for me.
I'm sure it's certainly brought back a few memories, particularly with some of those projects for some of our listeners as well.
Yes, I would think so, yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So we'd love your feedback, so get in touch with us. You can send us a message on any one of TerraCat's social media channels, and please keep an eye on our TerraCat Facebook page for details about our next month's episode. Thank you very much.